on the E30 today, and following on from my last video where the project started to get back on track, I'm very close again to booking the MOT. Hopefully we don't get any new and unexpected surprises today. One of the key things I need to look at is actually the headlight level. We've gone from the sublime to the ridiculous with them, to be honest, but I will get to that in a short while. The first thing I want to do is make one final fix to the steering, and it's the only weak link on the system now. So the final problem I have with the steering, which I wasn't so worked up about because I had much bigger problems till just a minute ago, is the fact that the original power steering pump is definitely on the blink. From the couple of shakedown runs I have had, I've noticed that the steering feels quite inconsistent and almost a bit grindy, and very noisy as well, especially when you're nearing full lock. Everything else in the steering system is actually brand new, so it really can only be the pump. And looking again at the power steering fluid that's in the reservoir, and this is actually its second fresh fill up with new oil, and this car's barely driven anywhere, it's brown again. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to swap in a new power steering pump. Aluminium tube is actually the gift that keeps on giving. Right, that's the tensioner locked. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is drain the reservoir, so I'm going to whip off this Jubilee clip. Bloody hell. Oh, right in the mouth. Oh God, in my moustache. So that's the pump off. I removed it just by the two bracket bolts, the quite long bolts that go through the, I think they go through the oil filter housing. Now, spinning this pump doesn't really seem like there's anything wrong with it, to be honest. It's probably the original one with the car, but it's definitely knackered based on the symptoms, and here is what I've got to replace it. It's just a cheap one I've picked up on eBay. Hopefully it does the job. Pulley bolts torque up to 22 Newton meters, and I actually am going to torque these correctly because I always get worked up about cracking the plastic pulleys. maybe I'll torque those on the car. Okay, so that seems about as much of the old fluid as I can get out. Before I go ahead and hook up the new pump, I'm just going to pour a bit of fresh fluid through it just to take any of the remaining crap out of the lines. What I'm using here is the same stuff as I used before, Manol Dextron 3, which is the standard spec power steering fluid. It's actually ATF, but that's what BMW opted to use. So let's see, it might just come straight out the bottom, but hopefully take some of the crap with it. Okay, ended up doing a couple of flushes through with it. Luckily I had a couple of extra cans of Dextron 3, so I had plenty to work with. Now all the brown fluid is gone, the fluid is nice and red, so I'm happy that that is fully serviced, working nice. Steered it left and right, feels smooth so far. I don't think we'll know properly until we actually take it for another test drive, but that part of today's job is done. Now I wasn't even planning to refinish this, but now I've modified the sides of it, I've decided it's a keeper. Gave it a bit of a refinish. To be honest, it looks like brand new. I'm quite chuffed with that. It's now no longer the only eyesore under the car. Okay, so the final thing to revisit before it's ready for its MOT is actually the headlight level. So let's see what we can do with that. Off camera, I actually added in some quite thick shims between the bottom mounting points on the headlights on both sides. And actually, when I drove it at night, I noticed that the headlights are actually really quite high since doing that. So instead, I'm going to remove them and either refine the shim thickness or work a bit more on those adjusters and see if I can actually get these to adjust properly. So really, we've gone from two extremes of ridiculousness. First off, they were pointing only at the floor. Then I added thick shims and they were blinding people, well, as much as you can blind people with these candle strength headlamps. So what I need to do is try and get it somewhere in between the 2 points. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put marks on the wall for where the headlights are currently pointing, which is just a bit too high. And then we'll see if we can get that to reduce just a bit. Right, so that's a few reference marks on the wall, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove a couple of the shims that I've got in, and we'll see how much that reduces it. Right, so just for reference, this is the kind of shim I'm talking about. It's kind of more like a big washer. It's around 2.5–3 mil thick. I had a couple of these underneath this bottom bracket, well, underneath all 4 of the bottom brackets, and I'm going to see how it looks with just one. One shim along the bottom, let's see what difference that's made. Okay, it's clearly gone down about 3 centimetres across the board, 3.5 there. Bear in mind, the actual wall is like 70 centimetres away from the actual headlight, which is very, very close. So a 3 centimetre difference is probably massive. Let's hope we aren't back to square one and the headlights are pointing at the floor again. But to be honest, I don't have any equipment here to set headlights correctly, so I might need to give it a drive before I can see the difference that's actually made. We might be in a situation where only in the MOT centre can they tell us how far out they are. At which point we're going to have to negotiate some kind of solution, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So there's nothing really more we can do with these headlights. We'll just see how we go, I suppose. Now, I've been on the phone to book an MOT, and they actually have a slot for tomorrow, which is quite exciting. Unfortunately, I couldn't book the time off work that short notice, so I'm going to have to leave it in the capable hands of the old man, who will hopefully do some good begging to get us a pass, but we'll find out. So there's not really anything more to do for the MOT, but I've checked the forecast, and unfortunately it does look like it's going to be raining, which isn't ideal because I'm supposed to be really using this as a fair weather car, and you already know how precious I am about the underside. I'd hate for that to get coated in mud on the first drive. In the comments of the previous video, there was quite a few people pointing out that what I'd done to protect the coilovers was probably insufficient. What I did was I sprayed copper grease all over the threads. Knowing how absolutely famous and notorious coilovers are for seizing and no longer being adjustable, I think I might take some people's advice and do something a bit more to protect them. The problem with just spraying grease on, apparently, is what happens then is road grime just coats the grease and it can stick to it much better, and that builds up, and then you end up in the same position as though you put no protection on at all, or worse off. As I've got a little bit of spare time today, I've actually got a cunning solution for that, which is these coilover covers. Let's whip the wheels off and I'll get these unpackaged on the bench and I'll tell you a little bit more about them. I actually picked these bad boys up on eBay and they're made to measure. I sent the guy some sizes from just pretty vague measurements with the tape measure underneath the car, and he made them to my spec. So let's get them unpackaged and I'll show you how they work. So I went for 36 centimeters in length for all 4, but the diameter for the fronts I went for 11 centimeters because it needs to encapsulate the spring, and for the rears I went for 8 centimeters because the spring's separate. Initially they look pretty good. It's quite a hard wearing canvas material. Seems like it'll be waterproof based on the lining. It's elasticated at the top and bottom, but there's also holes to slip in a cable tie to just secure it on in a semi-permanent fashion, and the Velcro is good and strong, so I have pretty high hopes for these. Right, let's hope I got my measurements right. Let's get them fitted. Right, that's all 4 wheels back on, torqued up to spec. I'm actually really happy with those coilover covers. I think that's one of those small mods that just pays back over years, and the quality just seems excellent. Now, I should have spec'd 40 centimeters in height for the front ones because the top of the covers doesn't quite cover the whole spring, which is completely my fault. I probably got my measurements without the car being at full droop, more fool me. But I think it's still going to make a world of difference. I may get some more to change that, but as things are, really quite happy with it. I'll link to them in the description, and maybe you might want to check them out and pick your own up. And with that, I'm feeling quite optimistic about the MOT tomorrow. I can't think of anything I've missed, and I've gone down the MOT checklist, but as always, these things can flag up the unexpected. Expect the unexpected. So buckle up, let's see what happens.
I've driven this car so far. It's about 10 miles and we're on our way to the MOT station. Everything seems fine, lights all work, it steers, it stops, it suspends. If it doesn't pass, probably be just a curveball, something we hadn't sort of expected. Let's see what happens.
Perfect.